Alright, most LED 7 segments are actually based on LEDs. LED is light emitting diodes, and basically they have two terminals. They have the anode and the cathode terminals. Okay, so you can see that from here. And for your LED to come on, what you need is you need a high. You need a VCC, or what called high. Okay, and you need a low or 0 volts. Okay, for your LED to light up. That's very simple. That's all it takes for your LED to come on. Now there are basically two ways we can configure our LEDs to come on. We can configure it to be we can configure our LEDs to come on with a 1 if the cathode is connected to 0 volts. Okay, in this scenario, we use a 1 or a high is what is required to turn on the LED. So if a 1 comes here, or a high, if we have a high here, that's VCC. What happens is that this LED comes on. Now in this case, we have a high turning on the LED. Now if we want a 0 or a low to turn on our LEDs, all we need to do is tie our anode to the VCC permanently. Now once it's tied permanently, all we need for our LEDs to come on is to use a 0 volt. Just apply a 0 volt here, that is here connected to ground, will cause our LEDs to come on. So basically two scenarios. The first scenario is using using a high to turn on our LED, and the second scenario is using a low to turn on our LEDs. Those are basically two ways our LED can come on, but generally they need a high on the anode and a low on the cathode. Okay, so our 7 segment units. Okay, it's 7 segments because usually, and it's arranged in form of an 8. Okay, because this is number 1, number 2, segment number 3, segment number 4, 5, 6, and 7. So that's usually where it ends the name 7 segments. And don't forget also, there's actually one LED here. Usually there's always a dot or decimal point, and that is that's actually another LED, but usually this is actually what makes the 7 segment basically. So I just want to walk you through how the LEDs are actually connected inside the 7 segments. So I explained earlier that 7 segments basically have they're of different types, 2 different types. The first is the common anode. Common anode, like I explained explained earlier, that what makes your LED common is that there's usually an anode terminal and a cathode terminal. The anode terminal uses a high, it's connected to a high. Then the cathode terminal is connected to ground or low, or a 0 or a low, and that causes your LED to come on. So for common anode, we have the anodes connected together like so. Okay, and the last one. Okay, so this is the number of, we have a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and in this way they are all connected to VCC, or what we also call high. Okay, and in this method, just like I showed you earlier, the 2 scenarios. In this scenario, since this is connected to a high, it means we need lows, we need zeros to turn on each of the respective segment LEDs. And okay, this is for common anodes. So common anode would require a 0 to turn on. So a 0 is on, that's a 0 or low volt is on, and a 1, so if you apply a 1 on the cathode, it will not come on, is off. Okay, so let's look at for common cathode. Common cathode, okay, common cathode has all the cathodes connected together. Okay, and they are all connected to a ground or 0 volt or what we call a low, anyhow you want to refer to that. And in this case, we would require a 1. Now, a 1 is required to turn on an LED since the cathodes are connected to 0 volt or ground. Now, okay, so we can say here that a 1 is on and 0 is off. Okay, so that is just basically for common cathode. So this is for common cathodes. Common cathodes require a 1 on the anodes, applied on the anodes for the LEDs to come on. So that's just basically the difference between common anodes and common cathodes. And for our tutorial, we are going to be using the common anode. Well, the common anode for choice is, well, it saves us. We don't get to use, the microcontroller does not really need to source for too much current to drive the LEDs compared to using a common cathode. A common cathode, if we are using a common cathode will require the microcontroller sourcing, that is driving to turn on the LEDs with much current, and that's the reason why we are going with the common anode choice, where we just need the microcontroller to just supply a 0 volt for the LEDs or the respective segments to be turned on.